Welcome to the amazing world of automobiles, where we explore the rich and sometimes quirky history of the machines that changed the world.
In the late 1960s, sports cars competing in the classic races like Le Mans, the Targa Florio, Daytona, Sebring and the Nürburgring were more powerful, faster and more spectacular than the Grand Prix cars of the time. Racing has always followed its own path. In the 1970s, it was a classic era. In this glorious period, drives by Pedro Rodriguez and Joe Siffert have become part of racing folklore. And the cars still inspire wonder. The powerful and lightweight Porsche 917 and the massive V8-powered McLarens that dominated the rich Can-Am series. This was a high point for sports car racing. And we go back to the 1970 and 71 championship years as seen by John Wyer's Porsche team. Through the 1970s, Matra was determined to restore French honour and win Le Mans. Porsche were ever present, and Renault took up the French challenge as sports car racing evolved through the 1970s. Sports car racing is much more about the car than the driver. In Grand Prix racing, the driver wins the World Championship. In the 1950s, Jaguar, Ferrari, Mercedes and Aston Martin used success gained in sports car racing to promote their companies and basically help sell cars. Ferrari was the mainstay of sports car racing in the early 1960s. In the 1960s, Ford was interested in buying Ferrari, but when negotiations broke down, the Blue Oval unleashed the most expensive racing program ever undertaken. The car was known as the GT40, and the object was to defeat Ferrari and anyone else who stood in the way. Ford eventually succeeded, the Anglo-US project winning the 1966 race with two New Zealanders, Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon. The following year, the All-American lineup of Dan Gurney and AJ Foyt triumphed, and then Ford were gone, having achieved their aims. In 1959, John Wyer led the Aston Martin team to victory at Le Mans. In the 1960s, he was heavily involved in the GT40. In 1968 and 69, Wyer and his JW Automotive team ran the GT40s on behalf of Ford, with distinctive blue and orange Gulf-Oils sponsorship. And they won Le Mans in both years. Porsche started competing in the early 1950s and had concentrated on small capacity class wins. By the end of the 1960s, they decided to go for the outright prize with the mighty 917. Sports car rules were established to guard against manufacturers making immensely powerful racing cars. To prove their capability, this is just what Porsche did. Porsche built 25 of the 4.5-litre air-cooled 917s on a scale of production never seen before or since. However, all the speed and potential doesn't mean you can win long-distance races. In 1970, major changes were happening in sports car racing. Porsche were impressed by the way that John Wyer's new company, JW Automotive, had beaten their more modern cars with the aging GT40. They decided to employ Wyer to run the works Porsche team. At a test session at Zeltweg, the team were introduced to the new car, the 917. The drivers complained about the road holding, so in front of a number of senior personnel from Porsche, team manager John Horstman, Armando Carfi and Peter Davis attacked the tail assembly with a set of tin snips. They cut away almost all of the entire tail and rebuilt it with aluminium sheet and self-tapping screws. The resulting short-tail 917 was declared a great success by the drivers and was 3 seconds a lap quicker than the original long-tail car. The model in this form was known as the Daytona 70. Porsche had nominated Joe Siffert and Brian Redman and hoped to have Jackie Eakes and Pedro Rodriguez as the other pair. Fortunately, Ickx had signed a contract for Ferrari in Formula One, which included sports cars. So Finland's Leo Kinnunen was signed up instead. The first event of 1970 was the Daytona 24 Hours on January the 31st. The team felt they were on trial and should be on their best behaviour. They were rather surprised to see another Porsche 917 turn up, entered by Porsche. This was the Porsche Salzburg concern, and the car was driven by Vic Elford and Kurt Ahrens. The race at Daytona turned out to be a textbook exercise for the Wire team, while the Porsche Salzburg car retired at an early stage. The main opposition to the Gulf-Porsche team was a pair of Ferrari 512s. The Rodriguez and Kinnunen 917 ran faultlessly throughout the race and won by a considerable margin. Siffert and Redman had a much more eventful race. They spent a lot of time in the pits with a brake hose, a rear shock absorber and finally a clutch being replaced. After these lengthy pit stops, Siffert was told to go out and go as fast as he liked, a situation he enjoyed, and the Swiss driver passed everything in sight, including Mario Andretti in the Ferrari 512, to regain second place. This superb result got the relationship between the Porsche team and John Wyer off to a good start.
But it was obviously going to be an interesting exercise in international relations. Porsche, who had won the World Championship in 1969, were going to be under British management with the support of Gulf Oil in the United States. My company, JW Automotive Engineering, had provided the principal competition to Porsche in 1968 and 1969, but it remained to be seen if this combination of our management, Porsche Engineering, and Gulf Oil could be forged into a winning team.
Was the Sebring 12-hour race in Florida. For this race, the Porsche engineers redesigned the front hub assembly. They tested it, only to find out that the assembly might have a fault. This news was communicated to Wire with no chance to change them. The story of these hubs was the story of the race. The Porsches dominated the first 3 hours before the left front hub failed on the Siffert car, which took 30 minutes to replace. Rodriguez-Kinnunen 917 continued to lead. Then their left front hub failed after 9.5 hours. Because the team had some practice in changing these hubs, this one was replaced in 15.5 minutes. After 10.5 hours, the right front hub on the Siffert car failed and the car was retired. Rodriguez fought his way back into the lead, but with only 20 minutes left of the 12-hour race, his right front hub failed this time. The team changed it in 9 minutes and 20 seconds, but the best that they could do was to finish in 4th place. The result of all this drama was that the race was gifted to a Ferrari 512 driven by Nino Vaccarella, Ignacio Giunti and Mario Andretti, who managed to hold off Peter Revson and the film star Steve McQueen in a Porsche 908. Relations between Porsche and John Wyer were a little strained after this race.
If this had happened in our first race, it would have been very depressing, but we often learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. Above all, Sebring was a breakdown in communications between Porsche and ourselves, and it was a problem we never had again.
Fortunately, the next round of Brands Hatch in England saw the matter put right. New hubs had been made which solved the Sebring problems. The Brands race was to be one of Pedro Rodriguez's greatest drives. The weather conditions were dreadful and rain swept across the Kent circuit. The main opposition was expected to come from the Ferrari of Jackie Ickx. In the opening laps, there was a serious accident in front of the pits and the yellow flag was displayed. Rodriguez didn't see the flag and continued at an undiminished speed until called in by the clerk of the course, Nick Syrett, to be reprimanded. Rodriguez sat in the car impassive while Syrett told him not to be a naughty boy. As soon as the lecture stopped, he let the clutch in, screamed out the pits, and started on the race of his life. He'd lost nearly a lap, but by 20 laps he'd retaken the lead and never for a moment looked as if he would lose it. Brian Redman crashed the other car. Rodriguez's performance in this race proved that he was the Rainmaster. For the next round of the World Prototype Championships at Monza, Porsche had produced a new 5-litre version of the Flat 12 to replace the original 4.5-litre. John Wyer elected not to run it until it was proven and used the older 4.5-litre in the Gulf-Porsches. Monza was a very hard race. Ferrari, on their home ground, sent a team of 4 512s and a strong driver lineup. The Gulf-Porsche team was not helped when Joe Siffert went off the road on lap 11, damaging the suspension and dropping out of contention. Pedro Rodriguez and Leo Kannunen had to fight off challenges from not only Ferrari, but also the Porsche Salzburg 917 of Alfred and Ahrens, which made the fastest lap.
At Monza, I was running with the 4.5-litre engine against all the 5-litre Ferraris. It was very difficult to keep up with them. And because of that, I was making a very hard race. I made an average speed over 144 miles an hour, and I won the race. But Ferrari came in second, third, and fourth, and it was a very tough one.
The next race was the famous Sicilian road race, the Targa Florio, one of the great challenges in sports car racing. Although not originally on the list of races to be contested by the Gulf 917 Porsches, Wyer was offered the new 908, a 3-litre air-cooled flat 8. A deal was worked out with Porsche that they would look after the cars while JW personnel supported them, a reversal of the usual position. The Porsche mechanics were far more familiar with the challenges of the Targa. 2 cars were entered, driven by Siffert and Redman, and Rodriguez and Kannunen.
Pedro Rodriguez was ill, and Kinnan took over as number 1 driver in their car, and he did a tremendous job. He made fastest lap, and the car finished second. The Targa Florio, of course, is a unique circuit. It's 44 miles round and very difficult to learn. In some respects, it's more like a rally than a race. And, of course, this suited Kinnan, who is a rally driver. He put the car into the lead at the start and lost it when Pedro was driving, which was a reversal of the situation at Monza. And then by his very great effort and fastest lap, got back into second place at the finish. The Targa Florio is really a race against the clock. The cars do not all start at the same time, so a car which starts 10 minutes behind you and passes the pits apparently 9 minutes behind you is actually a minute in front of you. And by the time you've worked out all the sums and radioed the signal through to the signal base up in the mountains, the car may have passed the signal base, and the driver has to wait until he gets back to the pits, a delay of 40 minutes before he receives the signal, which by that time may be out of date. Because of this signaling problem, Siffert was on the 3rd lap and taking things fairly easily before he realized that cars which were behind him on the road were actually in front of him.
This led to a supreme effort in the second part of the race as Siffert and Redman clawed their way up and took the lead late on. They went on to win in magnificent style, to the delight of the Porsche management. Each lap of the Targa Florio was 70 kilometers long and passed through villages and over unprotected mountain passes. For the 1,000 kilometers at the daunting Spa-Francorchamps circuit, the Gulf Porsche team were back in their short-tailed 917s, well suited to this super-fast circuit. The race started as a flat-out battle between Siffert and Rodriguez, who had a splendid time swapping the lead. Eventually, Rodriguez had to retire with a cracked gearbox. This left Siffert and Redman to score an easy win from the Surtees X Ferrari 512, with the Porsche Salzburg 917 in third. Rodriguez did have the satisfaction of setting a new lap record on this tremendous circuit. His time of 3 minutes 16.5 seconds was 9 seconds faster than the current Formula One lap record. With an astonishing speed of 257 kilometers an hour, these were the world's fastest racing cars. For the Nürburgring 1000 kilometers, the Wire team reverted to the smaller and more agile 908s. Siffert and Rodriguez led until the first pit stops at 11 laps. Unfortunately, Leo Kanoonen crashed on his first lap out of the pits. Joe Siffert and Brian Redman led until lap 22, when Redman came in with a seized engine, leaving the Porsche Salzburg cars to finish first and second. For Le Mans, the Gulf team elected to use the short chassis 917, while Porsche continued to think that the long-tailed car was superior and entered two for Porsche Salzburg, for Alfred Arends, and a second car for Martini racing team Larousse and Kausen. The Salzburg Porsche also had a short-tailed 917 for Richard Atwood and the former Mercedes driver Hans Hermann. American actor Steve McQueen was making the film Le Mans, and he entered a car for Guys van Lennep and David Piper. John Wyer entered 3 cars, Siffert and Redman, Rodriguez and Kanoonen, and bike champion Mike Hailwood with David Hobbs. John Wyer was convinced that the superior speed of the long-tailed car over the short-tailed version was cancelled out by its inferior handling, and he was to be proved correct. Vic Elford's long-tailed car would take the lead along the Mulsanne Straight, only to lose it to the Gulf cars by the time they reached the pits. For the Gulf team, the race was a disaster. Rodriguez's car broke its crankshaft after only 22 laps. Mike Hailwood crashed in his in heavy rain at the Dunlop Bridge. This left the Siffert-Redman car in the lead with 7 laps over the Atwood-Hermann Porsche. Shortly after 10 hours, Siffert missed a gear while overtaking 2 back markers in front of the pits and blew up the engine. This left the Atwood-Hermann red and white number 23 Porsche in the lead, which it held for the rest of the race. They won at an average speed of 192 kilometers an hour, having completed 4,580 kilometers. They were also second in the index of performance and 4th in the index of efficiency. The Martini Porsche of Larousse and Kausen finished second and 3rd in the index of performance and 1st in the index of efficiency. A Porsche 908, entered by the Martini team, driven by Lintz and Marco, finished 3rd. Although the Gulf team cars had failed at Le Mans, Porsche won the World Championship with 2 rounds remaining.
Le Mans was a complete disaster. Certainly our worst race and a tremendous disappointment. But if the race were to be run over again, I can't think of anything which we would have done differently.
The next race was the 1,000-kilometer enduro at Watkins Glen in upstate New York. At the Glen, the rivalry between Siffert and Rodriguez came to the fore. They made good starts, but then collided. Siffert had to stop to change a tyre, and Rodriguez to have a door repaired. The lead changed with pit stops, Rodriguez slightly in front. They finished 1st and 2nd, with Pedro winning by 44 seconds. There was also a Can-Am race at Watkins Glen, and the drivers persuaded John Wyer to let them race in it because they fancied a share of the prize money. Siffert was in his element. He nearly won, and this would have been embarrassing to Gulf as they also sponsored the winning McLarens. Rodriguez didn't finish when his engine failed. Siffert won far more money by finishing 2nd to Denny Hulme in the Can-Am race than Rodriguez did for winning the 1,000-kilometer event. At the Oostenrijkring, the Porsche teams had strong opposition from the new Ferrari 512M of Jackie Ickx, which was fastest in practice. The race started badly, with Rodriguez out on lap 5 with a broken tappet. Siffert made a big effort and took the lead on lap 73 out of 170, which he maintained to the finish. 15 laps from the end, his car also broke a tappet and went on to 11 cylinders. Although he was 15 seconds a lap slower, his lead was so great that he held on to win. In 1970, the Wire team had won 7 out of 9 races and felt that they had done a good job for Porsche during the year. In view of the success of the 917, the sports governing body, the CSI, decided to change the rules for 1972. They withdrew the dispensation of the 5-litre homologated cars, only allowing 3-litre prototypes. The legendary 917 would be allowed only 1 more year to race, and the rival, Ferrari.
Ferrari is always a formidable opponent. I think that a good axiom for motor racing might be never underrate Ferrari. They made a slightly uncertain start in 1970. The cars weren't very reliable, and the organisation was a bit shaky at times, but they improved steadily throughout the season, both in performance and reliability, and by the end of the season they had reached something very close to parity, certainly in performance. I think that 1971 could be still more interesting, because Porsche haven't been standing still, and we expect our cars to be better than they were in 1970. And it's the last year of the present formula, the last year in which we can use these big cars. In 1972, we all have to come down to 3 litres, and I think that the competition may then be even more intense.
The Gulf-Porsche team got the 1971 season off to a good start, taking 1st and 2nd place in the Buenos Aires 1,000-kilometre race. Siffert and Bell headed Rodriguez and Oliver. At Daytona, Rodriguez drove one of his best races to win after losing 19 minutes having the gearbox repaired. A pair of Ferrari 512s were behind him. Sebring was won by the Martini 917 after both the Gulf cars had problems. Siffert ran out of petrol while Rodriguez collided with Donohue's Ferrari. They eventually finished 4th and 5th. Rodriguez and Jackie Oliver won the Monza 1,000 kilometres, with Siffert and Derek Bell second. The Spa 1,000 kilometres was a similar result, Rodriguez and Oliver winning from Siffert and Bell. For Le Mans in 1971, Porsche engineers had produced a new version of the long-tailed car, the 917L. Even John Wyer was impressed with this car, which was capable of 380 kilometres an hour on the Mulsanne Straight. Well, for the first 2 hours, building up a lead. They were held up by electrical problems, and after 6 hours, the left rear hub assembly had to be changed. This cost over an hour. They fought their way back up into 6th place. After 17 hours, they had to retire with a cracked crankcase. Rodriguez and Oliver took over and led for the first 11 hours until the left rear hub assembly cracked, the same as on Siffert's car. This time they only lost 22 minutes and continued in 3rd place, still in contention. Only an hour later, an oil hose burst, wrecking the engine. This left the older 917K, driven by Dickie Atwood and Herbert Muller, in the lead. It was comfortably leading the Martini 917K of Dr. Helmut Marko and Gies van Lennep. Soon after, Muller pitted with no gears and the gearbox was replaced in 37 minutes. The car returned to the race in 2nd place, and Atwood and Muller drove a magnificent race to try and catch the Martini car. They failed by just 7.5 minutes. After Le Mans, Pedro Rodriguez won his last race for Porsche, the Oostenrijk 1,000 kilometres, overtaking the entire field after replacing a flat battery. The involvement between Gulf, Wire and the Porsche factory was coming to an end. Porsche had won the championship in both 1970 and 71. In 17 races, they'd won 11 and had been first and second 5 times. The years 1966 to 73 were the pinnacle of North American sports car racing, the famous Can-Am series. This was the wildest and richest sports car series ever, held at tracks in Canada and America. John Surtees won in 1966, but by 1967, the New Zealanders Denny Hulme and Bruce McLaren began to dominate. McLaren built the Mark 6A for 1967, powered by a large Chevrolet V8, and it proved the car to beat. Hulme won 3 races and McLaren 2, but Bruce scored more points and won the championship. In 1968, McLaren built the M8A using a 7-litre Chev V8. Hulme again won 3 races and Bruce won, and this time Denny was the champion and Bruce the runner-up. '69 saw the debut of the M8B, which is where the old cars left off. Bruce and Denny were the class of the field and won every round. Denny won 5 races and Bruce 6, taking the Can-Am title for the second time.
Likes the opportunity now and then to be able to come right from the back of the field. It's a great way. You just forget about anything going wrong with the car and just stand on it.
American driver Peter Revson.
My chassis has really had the Lola chassis has been very reliable, but since I've had these tires on it, I've broken wishbones and I've torn a radius rod off, and I've had to just beef up the whole back end of the car so that these tires just won't rip it apart, because they're providing such traction that you know, it's putting a strain on the chassis members. I think Bruce McLaren's team has sort of surprised everybody with their speed, and as of the first race, everyone has been making frantic development changes, trying to, you know, be competitive, and in doing this, I think maybe they've lost a little something in reliability.
1970 was much more difficult for the McLaren team. Tragically, team leader Bruce McLaren was killed testing the M8D. This used a 7.5-litre Chevrolet engine developed by engineering man George Boltoff. Dan Gurney joined the team and raced alongside Hulme. Denny was still suffering from burns to his hands from an accident at Indianapolis. Gurney won the first 2 rounds, and then contractual problems with Dan's sponsor Castrol intervened. This clashed with McLaren's arrangement with Gulf. Denny Hulme recovered to win 6 races and the Can-Am series. New teammate Peter Gethin came third.
But as a driver, you must deliver. Where do you learn the little tricks that keep you out front?
Following some of the older drivers. I think I've learned a lot from Jack Brabham, some from Jimmy Clark and all these. Being a relatively newcomer, you can always learn something.
1971 saw the introduction of the M8F, designed by Gordon Coppock. The engine size was up to 8 litres and it developed 740 brake horsepower. Peter Revson joined the team to replace Peter Gethin. Cosmetic Air Revson won 5 races to Denny Hulme's 4. Revson won the championship with Hulme second, McLaren's 5th title in a row. The late Denny Hulme speaking in 1990.
I enjoyed the Can-Am cars more, probably. They were much more exciting. The formula was virtually free. The people, the American people, were much more enthusiastic than what it seemed like the Formula One people were. And certainly the money was a hell of a lot better than Formula One as well, and we could probably go across there and get a 1-2, whereas it's very difficult to get a 1-2 in Formula One. Occasionally we managed that, but I thought the Can-Am cars were the best that I'd driven, and I still do.
You had more fun doing that than anything else?
Well, they were certainly much more fun. You could go out and knock a second off, and then go out next practice session and probably knock 2 or 3 seconds off. And yet, when they weren't supercharged or turbocharged, it's just that, you know, the harder you pushed your foot down, the faster the things went. And I don't think you ever really found out the optimum, just exactly how fast they could go. But they were certainly very exciting machines to drive.
You drove a Can-Am car again, I think, recently. How did it feel to jump back in one of the big McLarens again?
I went to Germany and drove the Can-Am car that actually Peter Rodriguez won the Can-Am Championship in '71 with. And it was like I'd never been away from it. The car's, now 20-odd years old. But it's absolutely immaculate, like the day we sold it. And it's beautiful to get back into. I say that because it was a works car, factory car, and I'd probably driven it, tested it, and driven it in 1 or 2 races before Peter got hold of it. So very enjoyable. The engine's probably got slightly more horsepower than what we had, but everything's just lovely. I thoroughly enjoy going back and driving the Can-Am cars. And surprisingly enough, they're not daunting to me. Probably less daunting than the Sierra is at the moment.
Le Mans in 1972 saw the CSI's changes to the regulations come into force. Group 5 now had a maximum engine size of 3 litres, which neatly banned the 917 and the Ferrari 512, but still allowed the French Matra V12. There was no doubt that Matra was determined to win the race for the glory of the Republic. One of the Lola Cosworths took the lead at the start, but was soon displaced by the Matras. There were the 670s of Henri Pescarolo and Graham Hill, and Francois Sever and Howden Ganley. The third Matra 670 retired with a piston failure. The two Matras were in an unassailable lead. The Pescarolo-Hill car won with Sever and Ganley second. This was the first French victory since the Rosiers Talbot in 1950.
Great achievement. He didn't think that, in his later years, that he would have the opportunity for a start. And when Matra asked him, he thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. So went and with Henry Pescarola, who he was quite matey with as well, the team was a perfect match. And I never thought he'd win it. But he was so experienced, you see, that, he was the choice to have with someone who was equally as experienced at Le Mans.
In 1973, Ferrari was back in business at Le Mans with a team of 3-litre V12 cars competing against the Matra Simcas. The race was a dramatic battle between Matra and Ferrari, with Porsche hardly getting a look in. The battle for the lead began with the Ferraris of Mazzario and Pace pulling away from the start. After 2 hours, they were passed by Beltoir and Sever's Matra. Next in the lead was the Matra of Patrick Depailler and Bob Wallach. In the 6th hour, Ferrari was back in the lead, the Carlos Reutemann-Tim Schenken 312. At half distance, they retired with engine problems, leaving Eakes and Redmond's Ferrari leading. The final lead change was when the Matra of Henri Pescarolo and Gérard Larousse took over. Pescarolo repeated his win of the previous year, this time with his co-driver Larousse, an all-French effort. In 1974, Le Mans was the preserve of the Matra team. It was also John Wyer's last Le Mans, this time with the prototype Mirage Cosworths. When did team manager John Horseman first meet John Wyer?
At the Piccadilly showrooms, 1958 in May. Went there for an interview for a position after I graduated university. And this very tall, somewhat stooped man came out, and I thought, this fellow doesn't have long to live. He looks a bit poorly, and in fact he lived another 35 years or so. And during that time we became very good friends.
He was known to have a real temper.
Yes, he had various nicknames. I think I forget them now, but he was always very good with me. I think there's only one incident when we had a little problem. Otherwise, we worked very well together.
What was his greatest strength as a team manager?
Oh, so many really, but a very logical mind, I think, was his greatest strength. He would think things through. He might make a decision one night, and then he would lie awake all night thinking about it and come back in the morning and say, well, I don't think that was correct, let's do so-and-so, and he was usually right.
He had firm opinions on drivers, and most of them seemed to take notice of what he said.
It was a little different in those days. The drivers were not quite so arrogant as they might be now. They drove for pleasure, not so much for money. John was very well respected. If he made certain suggestions as to how they should drive, they listened. John went into semi-retirement, but was still active. He would come down to the shop every day, but not there a full day. And I was left to look after the rest of the operation, and he worked well. He would come in and tell us what we were doing wrong, and we would realise it and put it right. And we had some success at the end.
Although the Mirage Gulfs had recorded excellent practice times, which put them 3rd and 4th on the grid, the Matras were soon in the top 4 places. The Gijs van Lennep Herbert Muller Porsche moved into 2nd place. The most dramatic period of the race began. First, the gearbox failed on the leading Matra, which had to pit and have it repaired. And then the Porsche lost all its gears except 3rd and 4th. While a hectic gearbox rebuild was taking place in the Matra pit, the Porsche, with only 2 gears, was slowly regaining lap after lap, reducing the Matra's lead. After a 47-minute pit stop, the Matra returned to the race only 4 minutes in front of the Porsche. It was enough to enable Pescarolo and LaRouche to pull away again and win the race for Matra. The Van Lennep Muller Porsche was 2nd, the Matra of Jabouille and Migaud was 3rd, and the Gulf Ford of Hayward and Bell 4th. Winner of the GT section was the Ferrari 365 GTB Daytona of Grandet and Bardini. 1974 was a remarkable result for Matra with a hat-trick of victories. Having achieved their twin aims of sports car success and a Formula One World Championship in 1969 with Jackie Stewart, Matra retired from motor racing, and the baton was later taken up by Renault. Long-time sports car driver Brian Redman remembers the era.
Now, the style of management of the teams has changed quite a lot because today there are immense commercial and financial pressures on the teams, and this is reflected in every aspect of it, from top management down to the man that sweeps the garage floor. Today, as in all sports, it doesn't matter what it is, the pressure is far greater, and in practical terms that means that 20 years ago, driving for John Wyer or for Porsche, any of the top teams, and John Wyer in particular, the style of life was very important. It was important to him and to the team that you stayed at the best hotels, that you ate at the best restaurants, and that everything was conducted in a relatively gentlemanly manner. Now today, that gentlemanly manner has gone by the board. It's how fast you go, how quickly you can do it, and how little they can pay you.
Le Mans in 1975 was considered the economy run. The organisers, the ACO, decided to run the race according to a fuel consumption formula, with a minimum number of laps between refuelling stops and a minimum of 3 kilometres per litre. They tried this back in 1956, and it didn't work very well then. They were rewarded for their initiative by the CSI withdrawing Le Mans from the World Championship. But just like the Indianapolis 500, Le Mans remains bigger than any racing series. There were 6 Ford Cosworth engined cars. 2 from John Wyer's Mirage Gulf team, now managed by John Horsman, with Wyer keeping an eye on the team for the last time. The Mirage Gulf of Chupin and Jean-Pierre Jossot went straight into the lead. They led for the first hour until they were passed by the Jackie Ickx Derek Bell car. During the evening, the Jean-Pierre Jossot Mirage was slowed by electrical problems. Alain de Cadenet was delayed when his bodywork fell off and when he collided with Migaud's Ligier. The Ickx Bell car was still leading by Sunday morning, and the second car was back into 2nd place. The electrics of the Chupin-Jossot car were affected by a sudden rainstorm, and had also pitted to change a cracked exhaust. This allowed the surviving Ligier DFV of Lafosse and Chassil into 2nd place. The winners, Jackie Ickx and Derek Bell, with an average of 190 kilometres an hour over the distance of 4,570 kilometres. In 1976, Le Mans was reborn. The race was thrown open to a much wider variety of cars. Group 4, 5 and 6 and even American stock cars were welcomed by the ACO. It was also the year of the turbocharger. Porsche entered two Group 6 2.1-litre 936 Spiders, driven by Jackie Ickx and the Dutchman Gijs van Lennep, and Reinhard Just and Jürgen Barth. They also entered a Group 5 2.9-litre 935 Turbo, a Carrera lookalike silhouette car. Against them was a 2-litre turbo Alpine Renault 442. The drivers, Patrick Tambay and Jose Dellum. These started in pole position. The Renault went straight into the lead, but was overtaken in the first hour by the Ickx van Lennep Porsche 936. Most interest in the race was the battle for second place between the works Porsche 936 of Barth and Just and the Renault. The Porsche was second until 7 a.m. when it retired with transmission failure, and the Renault went out with a burnt piston. The two Mirage 4s were running strongly in 4th and 5th places and moved up when the 2nd and 3rd place cars retired. Lafosse and Migaud held 2nd place for the rest of the race. Derek Bell and Vern Schuppan dropped back to 5th with a fuel pump problem. The Ickx van Lennep Porsche 936 had a 16-lap lead until they had a half-hour pit stop at midday on Sunday to repair a cracked exhaust. This cut the lead down to 8 laps, but it was still unassailable. They cruised home to an easy victory. Chris Kraft and Alain de Cadenet took full advantage of other teams' dramas and took 3rd in their Lola Ford. This was the first win for a turbocharged car at Le Mans. Le Mans in 1977 saw the first major attack on the race by the works Alpine Renault team. The main battle was expected to be between the Renaults and the Porsches. Pescarolo briefly challenged the leading Renaults, but he over-revved the engine and the car was withdrawn. The Renaults were running 1st, 2nd and 3rd, and the odds were heavily against a Porsche victory. Porsche management now made a quick decision. Jackie Ickx was put in with Jürgen Barth and Hurley Haywood in the 936. Drivers were allowed to change cars, and in Ickx's hands, the Porsche began to fly through the field. The Jossor Tombe Renault retired with a blown engine. The Depailler Lafitte car went into the pits to replace its gearbox, and it was passed by the flying Ickx Porsche. Then at 9 a.m, the leading Renault of Jabouille and Bell retired with piston failure, and the Porsche took the lead. The Depailler Lafitte Alpine might have challenged, but with 4 hours to go, its engine went the same way as the other team cars, and they had to retire. Nothing now seemed to be in the way of Jackie Ickx scoring his 4th victory at Le Mans, but the drama wasn't over. With an hour to go, the leading Porsche came into the pits. A piston had broken and there was no time to rebuild the engine. It was decided to stay in the pits until 3:50, 10 minutes from the end of the race. Jürgen Barth, an engineer by profession, would drive the car round for the final 2 laps. And this is what happened. At 4 p.m, the Ickx Barth Haywood Porsche was declared winner of the 1977 Le Mans 24-hour race. It wasn't all gloom and doom for Renault, as the Chupin-Jarrière Mirage Renault finished 2nd. Claude Ballolina and Peter Gregg's Porsche 935 finished 3rd and won Group 5. 1977 was one of the most exciting and dramatic Le Mans races ever. It was a 4th victory for Jackie Ickx, and a very popular one. Ickx had now equalled the record of his fellow Belgian, Olivier Gendebien, who'd also won Le Mans on 4 occasions, 1958, 1960, 61 and 62. Would Ickx be able to break the record? Le Mans often seems to repeat itself, and 1978 was no exception. Again, it was a battle between the works Porsche team and the Alpine Renaults. 4 of the powerful Alpine Renault A443s were entered with their turbocharged 2-litre V6 engines. Their main rivals were the three Martini Porsche 936 Turbo Spiders. One of these driven by the redoubtable pairing of Jackie Ickx and Henri Pescarolo. Although Ickx had set the fastest time in practice, the race started out badly for the Porsche. Within a few minutes, two of the 936s were in the pits, leaving the Alpine Renault of Pironi and Jossot in the lead. Bell and Jarier in the sister car was following, and the Walek-Bath Porsche 936 was in third place. The Ickx 936 went into the pits for a second time with a serious gearbox problem, and the team manager did it all over again and put Ickx in with Walek and Bath. And with his assistance, the car was up to second by midnight behind the Jabouille Depailler Renault. On Sunday morning, the Ickx Walek-Bath Porsche 936 lost its fifth gear in a similar manner to the Ickx Pescarolo car the previous night. It took little more than half an hour to have the gearbox rebuilt. After 12 hours, the leading Renault of Jabouille and Depailler blew its engine. Fortunately for Renault, the remaining team car had taken the lead while the Porsche was having its gearbox repaired. Although Ickx was able to reduce the lead, Jossot and Pironi drove home the Renault to its first historic victory in the 24-hour race. Second and third places were taken by the Porsche 936. Renault had achieved their ambition and won the Le Mans 24-hour race. Le Mans in 1979 was to be a Porsche benefit with the absence of the Renaults, who were now concentrating on Formula One. The fancy runners were soon in trouble, with Ickx in the 936 having a tyre blowout, damaging the bodywork and one of the radiators. It caused a long pit stop, which led to the eventual retirement of the car out on the circuit. Walek, Hayward and Bath with the 936 also pitted for a long time, but they returned to the race, got up to second place and then retired due to engine failure. This left the Bell-Hobbs Mirage Ford in the lead. When they fell back, the 935 K3 of Klaus Ludwig and Bill and Don Whittington took the lead, and this set the pattern for the rest of the race. Ludwig and the Whittingtons in the K3 came home comfortable winners. It was in this race that Dick Barber was joined by Paul Newman, the actor, and Rolf Stommelen. Of all the film stars who took up motor racing, he was perhaps the most talented. The car finished in second place with all the attendant publicity. Porsche didn't rest on their laurels, gaining success with the 956 and 962 in the 1980s. Attempts to kill off sports car racing so it wouldn't compete with the almighty power of Formula One, thankfully, haven't succeeded. The variety, uncertainty, intrigue, drama and commercial benefits of winning the big sports car races remain as strong as ever.